We usually think of history as this series of big inventions, these aha moments of genius that just change everything. But what if the real story, the true engine of human progress, is something else entirely? In this explainer, we're going to unpack a really powerful idea, that history, at its very core, is a chain of learning.
So let's just start with a huge question. What really powers human progress? Is it that light bulb moment from a lone inventor working away in a dusty workshop? Or is it something more collaborative, something bigger that stretches across borders and across centuries? It's time to challenge some of our basic assumptions.
So, you've got two big ideas clashing here. On one side, you have that classic image of the lone inventor, the singular genius. But on the other, you have the global student, a whole society that gets really, really good at watching, adapting, and borrowing ideas from other people. The argument we're digging into is that this global student is the real hero of the story.
And that brings us to our first section, the myth of invention. Because, as it turns out, having a brilliant idea is just the beginning. And maybe, just maybe, it's not even the most important part.
The really crucial concept here is something called knowledge diffusion. Think of it like this. An invention, like gunpowder, is a spark, right? But knowledge diffusion, well, that's the wind that carries that spark all over the world, setting fires of transformation everywhere it goes. An idea's true power isn't in its creation, it's in how it spreads. So, if knowledge spreads, can we actually trace its path? You bet we can. And this brings us to what we're calling the great chain of learning, a clear, traceable flow of ideas passed from one society to the next, like a baton in a relay race. And this chain isn't random at all. You can literally trace it. As this timeline shows, modern banking practices flow from Italy to the Dutch. The Dutch, in turn, influence English shipping and navigation. Britain's industrial techniques then become the textbook for Japan's incredible modernization, which later serves as a model for its neighbors. It's like the world's longest, most important relay race of progress. And hey, this isn't just dusty old history. Just look at the meteoric rise of South Korea and Taiwan. They became modern links in this chain by actively learning from Japan and the US to build world-class industries, from textiles all the way to the semiconductors that are probably powering the device you're watching this on right now. They became the ultimate global students. Okay, so this begs a pretty big question, right? Why are some societies such great students, while others kind of struggle to keep up? Well, it turns out there are two essential keys to unlocking this potential for learning. The first key is having a strong foundation of private enterprise already in place. And the story of this guy, Louis Maupassant, is a perfect illustration. See, he didn't just start from scratch. He inherited an old-school textile business, then he traveled to England to basically spy on their new factory methods. He came back, adapted what he saw, and built a modern factory in France. He succeeded because he blended the new technology with the expertise he already had. A new idea needs fertile ground to actually take root. And you see this exact same pattern in Japan. Its super fast modernization was only possible because it already had this deep well of commercial experience to draw from. We're talking about a centuries-old silk industry and a really complex shipping network. These were the perfect launch pads that let them just soak up Western industrial methods. All right, the second key is a competent, proactive government. And this number, wow, it's just staggering. Japan's Meiji government hired over 8,000 foreign experts to teach them basically everything. From engineering to law, this wasn't passive observation. This was a massive state-sponsored project of national learning. And Japan wasn't alone in this, not by a long shot. Over in Europe, by 1830, France had employed 15,000 British workers to transfer those critical industrial skills. See, governments across the continent knew you couldn't just import the machines. You had to import the experts who knew how to run them. Now, here's a crucial point. This government competence didn't just appear out of thin air. These states already had centuries of experience managing big, complex projects like canals and irrigation systems. They were flexing administrative muscles they had been building for generations. But underlying both the private businesses and the government action, there's an even more fundamental factor, and that brings us to the geographic advantage. So, what's the recipe for an economy that's primed to learn? It really boils down to two main ingredients. First, a high population density, which creates a rich network of skilled people. And second, access to water transport. Rivers and coasts were the internet of the pre-modern world,
allowing both goods and ideas to move cheaply and quickly.
This framework helps us understand not just success stories, but also why some places took a totally different path. And to do that, we need to look at a fascinating counterexample, the path not taken by China.
Okay, first, let's be absolutely clear. For centuries, China was a global innovator. I mean, during the Song dynasty, it was arguably the most sophisticated economy on Earth, pioneering things like paper money and building these vast trade networks. So what happened?
Well, under the later Qing dynasty, the government made a pretty rational choice. With all of this vast, fertile land, they focused on agriculture, and the results were dramatic. The population exploded from 150 to 400 million people, just as you see on this chart. By that measure, the policy was a massive triumph.
But, and this is a huge but, this success came with a trade-off. That intense focus on agriculture, along with restrictions on maritime trade, meant that commercial centers actually shrank. As this chart shows, urbanization, a key sign of a complex commercial economy, actually declined significantly.
And this slide really captures those two different paths. For China, with its immense fertile land, agriculture was the logical priority. It just made sense. But for places with limited farmland, like Japan, the Netherlands, or England, the sea was their field. They had to focus on maritime trade, which inadvertently created the very networks that made them such effective learners down the road.
This all brings us right back to the central thesis, and it's so important it's worth repeating. History is a chain of learning where innovations gain power through dissemination and adaptation.
So the true engine of history, then, isn't just a spark of genius. It's a society's capacity to learn, a capacity built on enterprise, supported by government, and enabled by geography. That's the whole package. And that leaves us with a final thought. If history is this great chain of learning, passed from one generation to the next, then what is our link? What are we learning? Who are we learning from? And what exactly will be our contribution to the chain?